in an hour. So I tend to refer to the book or the vow if that's
Yeah,
okay. And I'll just do that as
of
necessary.
course.
Yeah.
And I have my book here. I'm so excited. And I
Oh, wait,
was
hold on one sec. I lost your video for a second. You got the book.
oh,
Okay, great. You know what I have to
okay.
tell you?
What?
So when I texted you from the post office, I am sending it,
Yeah.
the book, um, which is like, it costs $12, which is not a big deal, but it's like half the cost of the book. And so
Right.
then I put some pens in it that say "I got out for you," and the extra 6 grams or whatever gram bumped it up to like $25. And I was like, I'm not paying $25 to send this pen and a book. And then she's like, well, you can take the pen out, but I'd already sealed everything.
Oh my
So then I was like,
gosh.
do you have tape and scissors so I can like take the pen out and then tape it? And she's like, no, you have to do that. So anyway, I still have them in my house and I need to like open it and seal it and bring it back. So I haven't even
Oh
sent it yet. I
my
got it.
gosh.
So that's what happened.
Well, that's okay.
Yeah.
Do you guys have like media mail where you can ship using media mail?
No, what's that?
It's it's for media, but you can sneak stuff like pins in,
Mhm.
but it's way cheaper
Mm.
and it's for like papers and books and kind of media stuff.
Mm.
But like someone just sent me some books from Australia and she had little boxes with bracelets in them. So
Mhm.
you know, if you were to feel the package, it's just a little box. So it's kind of a tricky way
Okay.
to save some
You know
money
what?
for us.
Wait, let me just ask you something. Do you edit later? Like, will
Yeah.
you cut the like unreal? Okay. Yes,
Oh
I'll just
yeah.
tell you that the Canadian postal system sucks. Nippy's
Oh.
always like, it makes it seem like a third world country. It's like it takes forever to get anything anywhere, and it's
Oh,
expensive.
that's
Yeah,
awful.
yeah,
And
it's
it's
just
so much more expensive, I
yeah,
feel like.
it is. It's much more expensive. Like whenever I have books to send people, I try to do it when I'm in the States
Oh,
because it's like yeah, it's like $3
that's
versus
smart.
12, and my hard copy costs like $25 to send.
Oh my god. And I think I wanna say because I have the audio book because
Mhm.
I like to listen,
Yeah,
but when I got this, I wanna say it was like 14 bucks
yeah, it's not very
on
much.
Amazon.
Yeah,
It's
and
crazy.
sometimes every now and then they drop it to like $4.
Oh my
So I get a
gosh.
friend of mine to buy it in bulk, like 10 of them, and then he
Yes.
sends them out from there, but then they're not signed. Like I also like to sign them. So I'm
Yeah,
sending you a signed book.
that is special.
Yeah.
But you do guys come to the States often?
We do, and we have, and we're also moving to the States.
That's what I was gonna
And
ask
yeah.
you because I heard that on your last
Yeah,
podcast
we're
or 2
moving
ago.
mid-August to Atlanta,
To Atlanta, Georgia?
Georgia.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Mhm. But we're
That
planning
is
an LA trip. You're in LA? Or where no, you're
no,
somewhere
I'm
else.
Northern California, so
Northern
I'm
California.
like 8 hours from LA.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah,
far.
it is. It
We'll have to
is.
do it where is it closer to Portland then?
Probably about the same.
About the same.
Yeah, yeah.
Wait, before
But I would
can we
travel down to see you.
I would travel up to see you. Hold on, can you just hold on 2 seconds?
Yes, of
Okay, and
course.
then we'll start. Okay.
Yeah, no, we're good.
It's my producer, Jessica Tardy. Are you hungover? Oh, poor girl. It's 'cause you're old. Listen, I'm just starting a podcast with ShannyPants for Shannon, for her pod. Can I call you after? Is it pressing or just saying hi? Yeah. 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 Okay. Yeah. Okay. Sure, I'll text her. That's time sensitive. Yeah. And I don't think I mentioned NXIVM much in that episode, so it should be fine. But we'll see. Okay. No, don't worry about it. You nurse your hangover. I'll call you after this.
Tell her I said hi.
And she says hi. Okay, bye. Bye. Yes.
A
It
good
was
time last night.
she saw the Dave Matthews Band live in Austin.
Oh my
I
god.
know. How jealous are you of that?
Yeah, I am. I really am. Okay.
Okay, so how do I sound? We're good?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay.
Um, okay. So we can go ahead and get started. I do a little intro Well, I'll do your like bio before as well.
Okay.
Um, but thank you so much for being on my podcast.
I'm so happy
And
to be here.
yay, I'm so excited. I've been looking forward to this one very much.
Thank you.
So, why don't you go ahead and tell the audience who you are?
Well, Sarah, in a nutshell, let's see. Born and raised in Vancouver. I am an actress. I am the child of former very left-wing hippie social activist parents who are now in the coffee's not kicked in yet. They're both therapists. What's that world?
Mental
Yeah,
health.
mental health. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I'm very articulate. But
Same.
yeah, and then I say that because it's important because it informed my journey, and my
Mm,
journey is a crazy story. When I try to encapsulate it like this, I'm like, wow, I can't believe I'm 44 and this all happened to me. But
mm,
um, in 2005, I joined what I thought was a personal and professional development program called Executive Success Programs. I loved it very much. It became my community. I did it because I was looking for community and meaning and purpose. And I really, at the time, I was a struggling actress, and this really filled a void for me in a lot of different ways. And I did that for years. I decided I wanted to bring this curriculum to Canada. There was no school at that time. I opened a center, traveled back and forth to Albany, New York, where we joked was where the mothership was. And all the while, I had friends joke about, Sarah's in a cult. And my agent would say, "You're going to shave your head." And we joke. And I even said, "Yeah, if this is a cult, it's a cult of happy, successful people. What's the bad? What possibly could be going on that would be bad? We're not drinking Kool-Aid. We're not shaving our heads and drinking goat's blood." So it was something that I just couldn't see until I saw it. And to make a very long story short, I ended up being invited into well, I was told it was unrelated, but found out later it was a subset of NXIVM, a secret society for women, supposed to be a badass bitch boot camp. And that um, led to a initiation ceremony that was supposed to be a tattoo, ended up being a brand. That brand was supposed to be there's a lot of supposed to be. This whole story has
mm,
like what I thought it was and then what it actually was. And they told me it was a symbol for the elements. And weeks later, when we figured out that it was actually a symbol for the leader of the personal development group, which overarching umbrella's name is called NXIVM. If you haven't heard about it in the news, I'm surprised because it was all over. It still continues to be in the news.
yeah.
Um, when I found out that it was a cryptic monogram for his initials, this is information that they hid from me because why would I say yes to that? And that, I mean, not only woke me up from the slumber I was in, and what waking up is the best way I describe coming out of the belief system that is part of a cult or a group that uses coercive control. When I woke up, I realized that um, Keith is not who he said he was this whole time, and that was basically a criminal enterprise. And the personal development program that I taught and that I brought to Canada was a front, essentially, to bring people in for. For his own personal needs to be met sexually, monetarily, and whatnot. So I made it my mission to not only bring him down and to expose the truth, but to literally free the slaves that he had
Mm.
under his control emotionally and in some cases also physically. So I'm very happy to say I've been 5 years out. At the end of this month, we'll be selling our 5-year anniversary of freedom.
Wow.
Yep. And yeah, it's been a lot's happened since then. There was a book that I wrote, which was important for me to get it into my own words.
I
There
have
she
it
is.
right
Yeah.
here.
There's the brand also, which I have to say I've also had removed. It's plastic surgery. You can talk about that later if you want.
Yes.
And then there was The Vow, 9-part docuseries on HBO. And now we have our podcast, a little bit culty, where we talk to survivors and experts about their experience in cults so we can give people a template of the red flags and they can avoid the same pitfalls that we went through. So same mistakes we went through. And that's me.
Right.
How's that first
Yes.
summary?
I mean, that's an intro and we can stop. Um, and that's how I met you was through your podcast.
Mhm.
And I'm sure I had heard of NXIVM at some point in my life, but I didn't grow up with a lot of like media influence.
Mhm.
So I probably was a little oblivious. But when I met you in the podcast, heard the story, it was just like, oh my gosh, I need to talk to her. And so I had the opportunity to meet with you and Nippy, your husband, and chat during a podcast. And you guys just are so inspiring. Your whole story just blows my mind. And I think what you're doing now is so important for so many people as far as just making people not feel alone if they are in a high control group or situation
Right.
where it's not just them. This happens to all sorts of people. I think it can be an embarrassing thing for some people to say, "Oh, I joined this crazy thing," and then to admit that it's not okay and get out. I think it can be a little embarrassing or scary if it's a, dangerous situation. But I think what you guys are bringing with your podcast is so healing, and obviously it has taken off. So you're already touching so many lives of survivors or people that might still be in cults or high control groups. So I just love you guys and I love
Oh,
what you're doing.
thank you.
And why don't you talk a little bit about kind of how you got in to, what obviously didn't start out in your mind as a cult and kind of how that transpired.
Sure. And this is, I go into great detail in this with my book and also the vow. But I think what I like to highlight are the things that I missed in this recruitment process, because I think, if I can make my story useful and educational for other people, then it's, less painful to look back on as,
Right.
the things that I missed. But yeah, I was dating a guy at the time who's a filmmaker. It's 2005, and he made a film that got into a film festival. And this is at a time in my life, like I said earlier in the intro, where I was, it's my oh no, I was mid-20s at this point. I was 27, about to turn 28. And it just wasn't fulfilled. And I've always thought there was like, I actually wanted to be an actress so I could have a voice to have influence. And I thought it would be more around, like, so ironic, but helping young women, because I had sort of had a hard time in high school and I'd been bullied and I was a late bloomer.
Mm.
And I just always wanted to help people not have the same experience I had. So I just had these, like, I don't know. I thought that acting would give me a voice, a platform, and I could have causes that I could champion and things like that. Little did I know it would turn out in a very different way, but I'd be able to do that. Um, but yeah, I met this filmmaker at this film festival where I was attending with my boyfriend who had a film, and he had made a film called What the Bleep Do We Know? And your audience may or may not know that film. It was huge in the early to mid 2000s. It was one of the top grossing docs of all time at that point. And the documentary was sort of the beginning of my pseudo spiritual journey. I'd been reading books like The Artist's Way and The Celestine Prophecy. And what the bleep came out, it really talked about how you could create your own reality and, like, where does happiness come from? And it was quantum physics and spirituality, and it was a whole hodgepodge of stuff. But at the time, I really loved it. And meeting him was a real honor, because I wanted to make media ultimately that shifted consciousness. I wanted to have an impact. My parents always taught me, make a difference. What are you going
Mm.
to do to leave the world a better place to live? And I thought, well, if I'm an actor, that's the kind of film I want to do, not a, beer commercial or
Yeah.
vampire TV shows or whatever. So we meet. Not I talk about that in the vow, these moments where I met him and I'm all starstruck and, really wanting to connect with him. And we had a conversation that really changed the whole trajectory of my life. And we ended up spending the week together. It was actually on a cruise that went from Florida to the Bahamas. And so my boyfriend and Mark and his girlfriend at the time, we just became friends. And somewhere along that trip, he said, you might like this workshop I just took. And I actually remember very clearly standing in these crystal clear waters in the Caribbean. I mean, it was all very magical. And he told me about Keith and how he was the smartest man in the world. And there was this community of like minded people. And he was very casual about it. But there was also somebody on that same cruise who I found out later was a recruiter, whereas Mark was just sharing something that he was passionate about, chasing me around the boat with this form saying if I signed up within the next 48 hours, I'd get a discount. And that actually really turned me off. But because it was Mark, and I also do love discounts. I put a deposit. I put a deposit down for $500. But that was I say that because it was a real red flag for me about like how there was this scarcity mentality of like there's only a few spots left.
Mm.
When I hear a few spots left for anything now, can I swear on this?
Yeah.
I
Run.
literally tell people
Yeah.
to go fuck yourself. Like, really?
Yeah.
There's only a few spots left? Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Liar. Liar.
Always.
Always. So that whole signing up process was a red flag. You got 20% off if you signed up within 48 hours. So I
Mm.
signed the paperwork. When I got home, I realized I was spending total. It was about $2,000, $2,160, I think, US, which was close to 2,500, even $3,000 in Canadian. And I'm living in a basement suite where my rent is $400 a month. So that's a big jump for a aspiring actress. And I called the company and I tried to get my money back. That was non-refundable. But I had this conversation with somebody who basically said, hold on, time. I was like, I'm in a podcast. I love you. Yeah, talk to you later. Welcome back. Sorry. Talk soon. I know. And she basically, strong-armed me with all the best intentions. I still know this woman and we have no bad blood, but she basically was like, wait, you're 28, turning 28 and you have no money? When is that going to change? What if you need to pay to play? What if you need to, I also said something about I need to be available for acting as my agent. She's like, oh, so do you want your to be waiting by the phone your whole life, or do you want to be the master of your own destiny,
Oh
the captain of
gosh.
your own ship? I mean, these are all really good points.
Right.
If what she was offering was true, but the thing is that I did want to change, and the curriculum offered this opportunity to basically, what they were pitching me was to basically give, if you're looking at your mind, body, the whole package of you as a computer, you're going to do a like a reboot, and you're going to look at the whole system and upgrade the software of you. And I still believe that that's a good thing to do every now and then. The question is, who's going to do it and in what format, and do you trust the leadership, and are they who they say they are? So that's a tricky thing. So
Yeah.
that's sort of the series of things that like the key red flags that I want to give to people if they hear this, if they're being invited to something, if there's a scarcity mentality, if they're feeling pressured to sign up, and their issues are being used, the issues in other words, your vulnerabilities, the things you want to change about yourself are being used against you to get you to do
Right.
something.
Right. Which
Yeah.
is such a tactic for so many groups.
Yes.
I know on your podcast you'll talk about like the MLMs, like there's so many different levels of that use that type of tactic that it degrades you kind of as a person into thinking you do need more help. So you're like, oh gosh, maybe I do need this in my life.
Right. Which is also pervasive in all these things, and it's just
Mm.
society in general, this thought of like that you're not okay.
Yeah.
And which I also, it's such a fine line because I think you can improve yourself and better yourself without feeling like shit underneath it. And what
Yes.
a lot of these groups do is they take advantage of the fact that a lot of us do feel like shit in many ways, or we have unresolved shame or trauma, and they tap into that and then they exploit it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly what happened in your
Mhm.
case,
Mhm.
because then you got it in and you were like full on in at that point, right?
Yes. Well, that's the other thing is I've since learned, like, I had a lot of red flags right from the beginning. Like,
Mm.
those are the red flags just before even coming, right? And
Wow. Yeah.
if I were to be presented with any of these things now, I would know to not even sign up. But
Right.
once I was there was a whole other set of red flags on day one that were preempted very strategically by the leadership,
Mm.
saying that you're here to. Well, it started off with a question of, wouldn't you agree that all successful people know their areas for growth?
Mm.
Sure, every success, if you want to be successful.
Right.
So that's the thing. It's a
Yes.
tricky, it's a double bind. If you say no, then you're not successful. So you have to be like, oh yeah, no,
Right.
I know my areas for growth. Okay, and you
Right.
paid good money to work on yourself. And wouldn't you agree that when you hit areas that are challenging, it's going to be uncomfortable? No pain,
Mm.
no gain, right? Of
Yeah.
course. You take, these are called lifts. Keith called them
Mm.
lifts. You lift to the next. So then they're saying, so when you feel uncomfortable, you're going to feel the urge to bolt, to leave. We just ask you to stay and work through those things with us. So, and there's truth in that. But when I had
Right.
uncomfortable moments of like, wait, you want me to wear a sash? And you want me to call him
Ah.
Vanguard and her prefect? And we're bowing to somebody I've never met before, and I'm paying tribute to somebody I've never met. And if I don't pay tribute, then I'm told I'm suppressive, which is the worst kind
Mm.
of person. So I better fall in line. All these things were happening. And I basically was like, I can't get my money back. So I'm just going to shut the fuck up and
Mm.
get what I can and show that I'm strong enough to work through my disintegrations to stay there. And I did, not knowing that in 3 days you can really um, indoctrinate someone into a new belief system.
Mm.
And by the fifth day, I was in.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That is mind blowing that in that short amount of time. And especially when you were already kind of feeling that resistance because you
Mhm.
wanted your money back, you obviously were having feelings that were saying, "Ooh, maybe not a good idea." And yet, even with that, in 5 days, you're 100% in. That's crazy. That is, and it is. It's so amazing the mind control that these leaders of whatever kind of group have over people, and it is so scary. And that's again why I think it's so important what you're doing is sharing some of these red flags where people might not see like you until you're out. You're like, oh yeah, lots of red flags there. And this is just giving the red flags to everyone else. So hopefully if they're ever approached or in a situation, they can think about some of these things.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I'd also add about that time is that I there's this concept called, I think it's sunk cost fallacy. Like, I wanted to get my money's worth. I couldn't get my money back, and the element of people around me, like my parents, were like, "That's a lot of money,"
Mm.
and they're in this world already, and so part of me was, it was a little bit of an individuation. Like, I'm not going to do your path. I'm doing my path. And it was
Mm.
sort of proving to them that I didn't make a bad decision.
Right.
Right. Which I feel like also explains, cut to years later, Keith is in jail for 120 years and NXIVM is no longer. And there's still a handful of people who are loyal
Right.
saying, that we made it all up and Keith is a genius and we just didn't understand and we're suppressive. And for them, they're really doubling down on, like, they can't admit that maybe they made the bad choice,
Right.
so that they have to be, it's a pride, partly a pride
Right.
piece,
So
ego.
much pride
Yeah.
involved. Yeah. I feel like I see that even in the group I came from, of course, not to the extreme of your cult, but there's still people that are involved. And with some of them that I know pretty well, I can almost 100% say, oh, it's pride. They
Mhm.
do not want to admit that they are wrong.
Mhm.
And it's sad, but it is what it is. And until you're ready to see a different opinion or get out, it's not like you can force someone to. But it is so scary. So once you kind of got past that 5 days and you're in, obviously it started as a positive thing, like
Mhm.
a personal development type thing. And
Mhm.
then how did that kind of change?
Yeah, and I'll say, even when I went back to write my book, there was this huge chunk of time that I couldn't even, like, I knew things were good. Things were good for the first, like, 3 to 4 years.
Hmm.
And also keep in mind, I wasn't I wasn't like, I had other things going on in my life. I was
Mm.
all in, but I didn't have a center yet till for another 4 years. So I was
Okay.
traveling, and I used the tools in my acting. I got into the Toronto Film Festival, which is like a really big, marker of success as an actor. Um, so the tools were working, and I had
Mm.
this little community of like-minded people who were working on ourselves, and we were, traveling. There was a school at the time in Tacoma, in Washington, near Seattle, and we were like traveling back and forth, and we felt like, that we were part of this sort of elite group of very passionate, driven, young entrepreneurs trying to change the world, and it was exciting, and we had
Mm.
great parties, and there's also lots of glamorous things during that time. I got invited on the Bronfman jet to fly. They picked me up in Vancouver, and I flew to Alaska. Like, flying on a PJs, as I've learned they're called, can really make someone feel special. And if
Oh,
so, if
yeah.
and that's I used to think like, "Oh, that's such a vulnerability," but it's a really normal thing that people
Yeah.
want that. And another red flag I'll share in that time is there's a lot of love bombing, a lot of
Mhm.
special attention from the leadership, making me feel accepted, welcomed, belonging that I've never felt before in my life.
Mm.
And that, in combination with the glamour, and then also by the time I opened my center, was an opportunity to have an income, and I started making really, really good money.
Hmm.
And so a combination of all those things made the weird, bad things kind of like, just not that
Could
obvious.
overlook
It
'em.
overlook it, yeah,
Yeah.
because it's like in any company, there's shitty things, right?
Right.
Like, one red flag is that this is a success program, and the admin team could never process an application without some major fuck up or failure. That was like, I'd have this VIP actress from LA coming in, taking 5 day, and they'd charge her credit card 3 times. Like, things like
Oh,
that were like,
gosh.
"Guys, you gotta get your shit together." And then I get in trouble for being not humanitarian, because this is a humanitarian organization, and people are gonna make mistakes, and we have to be compassionate with things, shit like that. So,
Mm.
there was a lot of things that, like, also just didn't make sense or never added up. Like, I was told Keith was celibate,
Mm.
and he was a renunciate. He didn't have any material possessions because he's so, um enlightened. He doesn't need those things. He
Mm.
has no attachments. And so when he was surrounded by a group of women, I'm like, "Oh, this is his team. This is his, like, one helping him get food, and one's helping him research his next training, and one's driving him." It was never like, "Oh, he's having sex with all of them," because why?
Mm.
That's completely inappropriate as a leader or as a therapist or a guide in any way to
Right.
be doing that. I mean, obviously, I was very naive, and knowing
Yeah.
what we know now. I mean, if I had seen any of the documentaries that are out now about these things,
Oh.
I would have been like, "Oh my god, he's fucking them," and gotten out of town.
Yep.
But I did not. But yeah, so there, like, when you say, when did things go bad? Things were bad from the beginning,
Mm.
but I couldn't see it, and things definitely got worse over the years. There was a time, I wanna say, it's a bit of a blur, it's in my book, but around 2012, I think. So I was in for about 7 years, and, um, somewhat one of his key right-hand women left in the middle of the night. And one time I showed up in Albany, and I said, "Where's Kristen?" And she had a son that
Mm.
was not her. We had been told, not her son. It was an adopted child of the organization sort of adopted, and she was going to raise him.
Mm.
And then all of a sudden they were gone, and I was told that she'd gone crazy and was, like, living on the streets. And I was like, "What? Like, are we looking for her?" Like, wha and that never sat right with me, but I
Mm.
figured that they were on it because she was a big part of the community. All of a sudden she was gone. Then one of my main mentors, who was somebody, her name was Barbara Jeske, was getting really sick, and she had brain cancer. And then another woman named Pam Kafritz, she had, I wanna say, liver cancer, renal cancer. And so these are, like, really strong, healthy. I mean, if this is like me in 10 years, in terms of, like, we drink green juice and kombucha, and we
Mm.
go for walks, and we get infrared saunas, like, all the things, not unhealthy people. And these women were getting cancer, and that really, I actually thought there was something in the water. I was
Mm.
starting to do research about, like, things in upstate New York, and was there, uh, some sort of leakage from a plant or something, some toxic spill. So like there was these things that were happening, and then some other things like Keith created a new curriculum, and he basically took my entire staff, and my center was very successful. It was one of the most successful. It was between Monterey, Mexico City, and mine. And he like basically stole over half my staff to start
Mm,
this new curriculum, and then I couldn't run the training that people paid for here. So I was like always scrambling. I was always,
mm,
and that's when I look back, one of the other red flags is I never had time to stop and think. I was always go, 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 build, 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 fill, and I was filling the trainings. I was like one of the top. I say that like I'm not proud of it, but it's
right.
just what it was. Like I was good at recruiting because I
Right.
believed in it so much, and I thought I was doing good, and
Mm,
truthfully, like, I still do believe there was good in the initial 5-day training and even the 16-day, but there was also the beginnings of the seeds that were planted ultimately for long-term manipulation if you stayed.
mm,
You know what I mean? Like, if you came
yeah.
and did a 5-day, and this I found out later from many people who took the training when I was apologizing, and they were like, "I got my money's worth and I'm okay." And
Wow.
another which was great to know, and they're like, "I still use this tool or that tool." I'm like, "Well, just so you know, Keith didn't create that. That comes from NLP, and that comes from cognitive behavioral therapy, and that comes from Buddhism, and that comes from Scientology, which comes from LifeSpring, like there's this whole
Oh,
web of like all of these tools are kind of a hodgepodge of things that come from other places, and nobody can really come up with anything unique now because it's all the same shit,
right.
you know. So I mean, and ultimately what it was is in 2014 I had Nippy and I had our first child, and that really shifted my priorities and
Mhm.
pulled me away from the organization, which I think they felt, and that's when they promoted me to a level that I've been trying to get to for a long time, my green sash. So they kind of like hooked me back in
Yep.
and gave me another level of authority, which I liked,
Mm.
but also was like, wait, why did I get this? Like it didn't feel earned.
Yeah.
Um, and then there was a couple years of like just same thing, go, 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 go. And that's when they brought me into the women's group.
Mm.
Or I was invited to the women's group by my best friend, the godmother of our child, and my maid of honor, Lauren. And I just thought it was like a kind of next level exercise.
Right.
And I said, "Sure." I mean,
Yeah.
lots of red flags there, but I was like that she said, "That's the whole point. If you feel anxious about it, that means you're, like, doing it right."
Mm. Gosh. And your book explains that all. Oh my gosh. In so much depth,
Yeah.
and again, it's just so amazing that manipulation, and even in that instance, probably I'm sure you felt like, "Ooh, it's an elite group and I got invited, so I'm extra special."
Mhm.
But it's mind-blowing what that group was and turned into, which was that kind of ultimately what got you out, correct?
Yeah. I think if I hadn't been branded and it had gone to that extreme, I don't know what I'd still be doing. I
Mm,
mean, I didn't really realize how many problems I had with the organization until I could see it for what it was, because I just couldn't it's also, like, the way that it's set up in that if I had a problem with anything like, for example, when they started this new curriculum, I was expected to fill it and fill the trainings and recruit for it, but they decided because it was new curriculum, they weren't gonna pay us there was only a handful of salespeople that did what I did, and we made a commission. Depending on the program, it was 10% or 20% commission, and that took a lot of work for me to do that, so
mm.
all of a sudden, they weren't paying me because some bullshit reason. At one point, I even asked, and I was told I was being entitled, which is like one of the worst things to be, especially as a woman. That was
Yeah.
like women were there's a whole female empowerment curriculum called Jeunesse, and that was one of the things we looked at. It's like what are the things that we do that aren't good? Like we're princessy and we're entitled and we're all these terrible traits. It was supposed to be empowering, but ended up making us feel terrible as women.
Mm,
So sorry, I tangented. So yeah, so there was these things that I was aware of, but like you can't complain. If you say anything like that, then it's your issue. Or if I were like, "Oh, look, I'm really upset that I'm doing all this work and I'm not getting compensated for it," be like, well, you seem really upset about that. You need to go journal on it and talk to your coach and then come back to me when you're less reactive.
Mm.
The level so that kind of thing. And you weren't allowed to ever go down, like there's it's in the pyramid scheme of it all, or in the structure. If I were to have recruited you and you're my best friend, say, and you're like, how are you? I was always like, I'm great, I'm so good.
Mm.
So the toxic positivity, which you also see a lot in MLMs, you can't ever express any negativity or any doubt, because that's bad leadership.
Yeah.
It's and there
Showing
is,
weakness.
yeah, you're showing any weakness, and you don't want to show, like, it's always you put on that face. So I couldn't go up and I couldn't go down. So when things fell apart, Nippy and I were in many ways relieved, because we didn't like, we were doing so much work for a company that was really destined to fail. It wasn't ever set up for the things that we thought it was set up for. It was really set up just so that Keith could have a steady supply of fresh women.
Mm.
That's it. And enough money for him to do what he wanted to do.
That is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh. And so how long were you in total?
Total 12 years, almost to the month.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a big chunk of your life.
Mm-hmm. My
And
entire 30s.
wow. And
Yeah.
you had did you have your second child when you were in, or was that
No.
once you were out?
He was born in 2019, so I had been out for 3 years. 2
Okay.
years. Yeah.
Oh,
Mhm.
wow. And so
Mhm.
when you speak about like if you're having issues, who you have to talk to, were you ever allowed any outside counseling or any help besides what they would provide for you?
It wasn't even that it wasn't allowed. We had been indoctrinated to believe that therapy was bullshit,
Mm.
that therapy was just talk, 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 and what we did got to the core of the issue. So I didn't even trust my parents' expertise, or I had zero respect for what they did, because I didn't think it was any good.
Mm.
I
Wow.
actually, when my original boyfriend, the one I started NXIVM with, we were together for the first 3 years of my time there, and we grew apart, partly because I went up the straight path and he didn't really,
Mm.
and it was also very much kind of frowned upon to be with somebody who, like, wasn't on mission if you were on mission, and I don't even know where we'd be if, we hadn't started NXIVM, because we were very much driven apart by that sort of mentality. But we did try to see a couples counselor in that time, and I just remember thinking and looking at him going, "I know more than you. And, like, you can't help me, because you're asking questions that don't even make sense given what I know about the definitions of, like, love and whatever." Like, I just didn't,
Wow.
yeah.
Because
So
you were trained to be smarter than
Mhm.
everyone else.
Ironically, sidebar, I went back to that couples counselor, and Nippy and I see him now, and he's amazing.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
awesome. Full
He's
circle.
helped me a lot. I have lots of
Oh,
respect for him now.
that is so amazing.
Mhm.
Now, how so kind of when you got branded, so you got into this elite women's group, and which was basically Keith's group, but you
Yeah.
weren't told that, right? He was supposed to be not even involved in this group at
No,
all. Is that correct?
correct. It was a women's only group, and
Ugh,
we'd never know who was in it. We'd never know, except for this, there was, like, these little pods. I would only know who my sisters were and my master, but I'd never know who her master was, because that's Keith.
wow. That's not weird at all.
Yeah,
Totally normal.
and I do, like, you know, obviously, I'd love for people to read my book, but it's also explained better in there and in the vow, because there's a lot of things that led up to that. It
Yeah.
wasn't just like, "Yeah, I'm gonna join this and then get branded." There was various levels of ensuring consent,
Mm,
ensuring, that it would look consensual. It wasn't actually consensual, but it even came out in the trial that Keith told Allison, "Have the women say in the branding, 'Master, would you brand me? It would be an honor,' so that it looks consensual." And that
mm,
they could always go back and say, "Well, they asked for it." Shit like that. And so they set it up so that and this is the whole thing with NXIVM, and what I've since learned with every cult, is that people can't coercion is a metaphorical gun to the head. There's
mm,
always something held against you, and I'm so actually just interviewing um, a man who was exposing this cult, and actually not far from where you are. Have you heard of Fellowship of Friends?
No.
Okay, it's a whole. I'll send you the podcast link for that one. But
Yes, please do.
yeah, in the community, like same sex relationships were not allowed. You couldn't be gay, but the leader was basically sodomizing or getting sodomized by all these young straight men. That's only so he would behind closed doors,
Mm.
right? And these men, by the time they get brought into that, have been told all these things and they believe and they've bought in to a number of levels of indoctrination, including that if you leave, like you're dead.
Oh, yeah.
So in the moment of being like, do this or do that, you don't have a choice
Right.
in your
Right.
mind, right? So
Right.
there's no actual gun to the head, but there's the belief that it's this or you die or you're cast out and you have nothing. And a lot of these men actually came from Russia and Romania, and they were brought there on religious visas to do work
Mm.
for this church, which that's not even a church. It was just set up that way so that they could have protection and tax
Right.
exemption.
Right. Oh my
Anyway,
gosh.
yeah. So this is
It's
everywhere.
Yeah, and that's what's so crazy. It's like you get these, well, men or women, I guess, that just have that little bit of taste of power, and it just never ends
Hmm.
until they get taken down like what you did. So, yay.
Yay.
At least one of them is in prison.
Yes, totally.
So, why don't you talk a little bit about kind of getting out? And I know I want people to read your book as well because I it was great. I listened to it first. Now I have the paper version,
Mhm.
but it was fabulous. So, but why don't you talk a little bit about getting out and how kind of sketchy that was, and then kind of your life after now?
Sure. And honestly, when I got and I did narrate the Audible, so that was the first time it took 4 days. I did 4-hour chunks of about 4 days, and when I read it, by the time I got to this part, I was like, "Wow, this reads like a true crime, like, radio play." It was so intense. I was like, "This is
Yeah.
crazy that this happened to me," and I'm not gonna go into all the details because 'cause I'll save it for your listeners, but, I mean, I went to the FBI. I was talking to authorities in upstate New York. I was writing letters to the medical board about the branding, all the while living a double life. There was a 2 or 3 week period where NXIVM didn't know that I was awake and out, and I was basically trying to bide my time to figure out how to exit. And it went in stages. From okay, I'm not doing this anymore. I've got to get out. Then whoa, this is much bigger than I thought. And as my husband and I shared with people that we felt we could trust, because we understood pretty quickly that if we went to told the wrong person, it would go right to the top, and then I'd be a defector and I'd be sued in a second, because I'd seen what they'd done to other defectors in the past,
Mm.
dragging them through lawsuits for decades. So we were very strategic. There was a team of us, or as I said, we went from like we have to get out to like no, we have to expose this, and we knew that other women were involved, but we didn't know how many. And when I realized that the DOS, the women's group, had basically recruited almost my entire female staff in Vancouver, except for maybe 2 or 3, um, I was livid, because I then found out as I started to warn people, and most of these women hadn't been branded yet. I thank God I was literally stopping people from getting on a plane to come to the
Mm.
next coach retreat, which I was supposed to be at also. And I knew the next round of branding was going to take place. So initially it was like, stop the branding, expose expose the truth the best way we could without getting in trouble. And then as we started to talk to people, we realized that a lot of these other women had given way more. I mean, I didn't get into this earlier, but even just to get into DOS, you had to give collateral to ensure your secrecy that would be on the line should you ever spoke out. And I found out that other women had given like sex tapes and, very personal, explicit, up close pictures of their genitalia. And this is my community. I feel very protective over it. A lot of these people had never even been to Albany, or if they had, they'd only
Mm.
gone to the retreats or a couple of courses. I had built a very beautiful, cohesive, supportive, loving community in Vancouver. And now these women were being exploited. And I also had figured out pretty quickly, these pictures aren't for collateral. These are pictures for Keith's personal spank bank. And
Mm-hmm.
it came out in the trial that he was taking up close pictures of women's vaginas since even before the women's group. Like, that's what he did with the women that he fucked. It was like part of his thing, you know.
Gosh.
And that ended up being one of the major pieces of evidence too in the trial, all these vagina photos.
Right?
Isn't that wild?
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
So
Very wild.
very wild. All of this to say, most people we spoke to were instantly disgusted. And because I was so afraid of breaking my vow and having my collateral released, I wasn't even telling people.
Mm.
I was just saying, I can't speak about it. I'm leaving. And because people trusted Nippy and I, they're like, well, if Nippy and Sarah are leaving, I'm leaving. I don't care what it is.
Mm.
And other people who had already had some experience with DOS were like, whoa, that's where it's going? I'm supposed to have Keith's initials on my body? Fuck that.
Mm.
Save for a handful of people who, unfortunately, were basically scooped up by the leadership before I could get to them, had fucked enough to make the decision for themselves that they had a good experience, and I had clearly just had a bad experience. And then there was this whole campaign against us about, Sarah's having a temper tantrum and all these different rumors and lies spread about me. Like, I wanted a spot on the executive board, I didn't get it, and now I'm reacting, or Nippy and I are having troubles, so I'm doing it to save the marriage, which actually was what we had planted. Because we
Oh.
did, this was part of our exit strategy. We'd been told that to leave a group like this, you have to leave because of your issues, right? Like, oh, she's like, we had heard it from other people. Oh, she was never able to work through her pride. And so she's gone, or she's never been able to work through her suffering, and whatever the
Wow.
thing was that was your thing
Mm.
was why you left. So Nippy and we made it look that Nippy was upset that I'd been branded, and that I was going to choose him and try to work on our marriage and leave the company. That's what I told Lauren.
Mm.
And that was great, because that's that was a good exit for,
Yeah.
as it was a good cover up for the fact that we were both leaving, because you can't actually say, you know, to Keith or a narcissistic sociopath, you're a bad person. We see it, and we're going to expose it, because then they're going to do whatever they can to destroy you. So we had to be like, we're all good. I'll give you the keys to the kingdom. I'll give you, you can have the center. Someone else can run it, but we have to go work on our marriage, because this is clearly no good that I have,
Right.
right?
It's all our fault
Yeah.
just to
So
get out.
right. So then it was like, Sarah's dependent on Nippy. She's never worked through her dependency issues. And, Nippy's really angry. He's never worked through his anger issues, blah, blah, blah.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of gave you part of your out. Obviously, there's a lot that goes into that part of your story.
Mm-hmm.
So then there was a trial. Now, how long is Keith in prison for again?
Well, just a quick thing before that.
Yeah.
Myself, Mark Vicente, the one who brought me in, also helped me get out. His wife, Bonnie Peace, and Catherine Oxenberg went on the record in the New York Times, and that article, and I'm on the front page of the New York Times showing my brand, so people could see this physical abuse. And up until now, I mean, Keith had been abusing people emotionally and sexually for many years, but that's very hard to prove. Now I have the physical proof on my body. I was the only one willing to show it, which was crazy to me, because there was other women who were out with me who were just, they didn't want to be, they were just too scared. They were too ashamed. And I also didn't want their collateral release. At this point, I was like, I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Because also don't forget, as a leader, as a woman who brought in all these other women, I felt like it was my responsibility to do whatever I could.
Yeah.
And some of the other women that were branded with me, they weren't at that same level of leadership and didn't want to do that. And I hated it, but I respected it.
Right.
I wish I wasn't so alone.
Mm.
But those women did give off the record statements for the New York Times, so they knew it wasn't just one person.
Right.
And that article started the investigation in the Eastern District, not the district in which Keith operates, because that district, we believe there'd been a bunch of corruption to protect him. Whether people were bought off, we don't know. That's still coming to light. but a different district prosecuted him. Cut to 6-week trial, very quick deliberation of the jury, as it was so clear that all these allegations were true, and he got sentenced to 120 years plus 5 years probation.
That is
Mhm.
amazing.
Mhm.
And how did that feel
Oh,
when that came through?
I mean, I think we both cried tears of relief. I mean,
Mm,
it's not like a joyful thing. It's more of a, like, it's vindication, it's closure, um, it's relief that the justice system works, and it doesn't always work,
right.
and there's been times, of course, in history where it hasn't, but the evidence was there, the testimonies were very clear, and the pattern of abuse was very clear.
Mm,
But it's also, like, a heavy sadness that watching my friends,
mm,
have to be under scrutiny and win the trial, and then also other like Lauren, my former friend,
mm.
being cross-examined by Keith's, in my opinion, very I don't wanna say douchebag, but just a he has he's got a job to do too, but it's just
Right.
like that
Yeah.
his line of questioning was very difficult to I
Mm,
read transcripts later. Just to see my friends go through that is painful. So it's a whole mixture of emotions, but ultimately, even now, they are appealing and trying to,
mm.
come up with all this bullshit about, like, planted evidence and,
Oh,
um,
God.
you know, and everyone can see exactly what they're doing. It's ironic because allegedly, Keith had an enemy, who was blogging about him, and he had him but, this is what I understand. I don't know, I haven't done a deep dive on it, but he had the local authorities arrest him and plant one piece of child porn on his computer, and that's what got this other guy arrested, and that's what Keith is saying has happened to him, is that the FBI planted
My
it,
gosh.
or there was
Oh, my
tampering of the
gosh.
evidence or whatever.
Ah,
But you could also have another trial and put everyone under oath and ask them again, "At what age did you start having sex with Keith Raniere?" And would all come out again. Anyway, it's a
right.
really messy situation, and so even now, they're trying to appeal, and there's always that thought in my mind of, like, is he gonna find some crazy loophole and be out on the streets again?
Right. And it's like you said, it's ongoing. So yes,
Mhm,
he's in prison, but it's not you have that like you said, that relief for now, and that at least he's not, harming other people as he was before. So at
mhm.
least for now, it's all good,
Yes.
but it is ongoing. And the first season of The Vow, which you had mentioned before, is on HBO. The second season, did it just come out?
Mhm.
Yeah, it's
Not
out
sorry,
now, right?
I'm sorry, it's not out yet. I don't even have an announcement, but hopefully soon. It
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the second season is soon.
Mhm.
Are you on the second season
I am, but I'm
as
not
well?
as
Okay.
featured as far as I know. I'm there, but it's
Okay.
more focused on the inner circle
Okay.
and the trial and some of the leadership, as far as I know.
Oh,
Yeah, like,
interesting.
apparently Nancy and Keith are both interviewed.
Oh my gosh.
Mhm.
Oh, that'll be very interesting. And then speaking of her, he still has, like you said, this group that truly still believes in him and everything he stands for. And that has caused you to lose some relationships that of people that were really close to you, correct?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, some of the people that are still loyal to him were at our wedding,
Mm,
and, I just want them to get their lives back. I want them like they don't think they need to wake up. I think they need to wake up, but ultimately, they can't see what we can see, which is that Keith is not who he says he is,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
all the things that Keith has done, they can if I mean, if it was true that Keith really is a noble humanitarian, the most ethical, most intelligent man, a modern day Jesus or Buddha, then everything he does can be explained by, like, he's got a reason for everything he does because he sees things that we can't, and
Mhm.
he's got a higher level of consciousness or intelligence or awareness, and so maybe branding his initials on people's body is a part of something that and there are people who were like, "Really, maybe I just don't understand it." I even had that when
Mm,
I left, like, maybe I don't understand his genius.
Right.
So they're in that structure, and this is something that all of these cults that we've researched, I have seen as a pattern, is that when you put someone on that pedestal and give them authority to make the decisions in your life or to know better,
Mm.
assuming that's true, and they can get away with anything. That's where the ultimate
Yeah.
abuse of power happens. Like in that
Right.
cult I was just mentioning, with Fellowship of Friends, this leader is sexually abusing these young men and saying this is their only chance to have a real connection with God,
Right. Yeah.
and they believe it. So
Yeah.
in their minds, and listen, I've been there because I was in NXIVM when we were being attacked, and I thought, wow, like the world really doesn't understand what we're
Yeah.
trying to do. Like how devastating.
Mm.
So I I get where they're coming from. I just wish I
Right.
could reach in and be like, you can let go now.
Yeah.
It's over. Start
Yeah.
again. Just
Ugh.
so it's
Yeah.
really sad to me.
Oh,
Devastating.
absolutely. And like you were saying earlier, it's everywhere. It's all
Mhm.
around us, all these groups that you would never really know about. And that's becoming very clear to me as I kind of dig in more to my healing is wow, this is actually like more common than you would think.
Mhm.
So it is sad for those that are still inside these types groups and can't see it. But same as you, like I can remember still, I was born into our group, but y- I can understand those that are still apart because I was there not very long ago.
Mhm.
So you still understand that kind of the mental brainwashing really that is going on for years and years and years. So it's hard to judge people that are still in those situations.
Mhm.
But same as you, it's just like, oh my gosh, there's so much freedom out here. Like
Yes.
it makes me really sad.
Yeah, and you don't realize how free, well, you don't realize how not free you were until you are free.
Yeah.
And just like I didn't realize how, like, every relationship I had, every person I met, from a waitress to someone on the plane to someone at a party, I couldn't help but think, what's going on for them? Where are they struggling? And what program would be good for them in
Mm,
NXIVM? Janess, SOP, Rainbow, Executive Success, everybody. That's how I was always recruiting. I was always, and we called it enrolling,
mm.
which Keith said was building humanity.
Oh,
So
precious.
so I was just out there building humanity, one person at a time. And I didn't realize how much that tainted every conversation because really there was, even
Mm,
though at the time it was a positive agenda,
right.
I still had a hidden one.
Right.
And to be out in the world and just be like, "Oh, Shaddy, like, what do you do?" I
Right.
mean, now I'm gonna recruit you into my podcast, but
Right. Right. But you genuinely
yeah,
care and
yeah,
wanna know about
mhm,
another person. And
mhm,
I feel the same way. We were so judgmental and also like superficial relationships. So none of our relationships were deep. And so that's been so exciting being out. And of course, now I'm in my 40s and I'm creating friendships, true, intimate, real relationships with people
mhm,
that I've never had before. And I'm like, oh, wow, this is amazing. Like, we don't have to pretend to be happy all the time. It's okay to
yeah,
have bad days.
totally. What if that is a freedom, like, the
Mm.
freedom to actually feel how you feel and not have a face on.
Right.
And
Right.
the other freedom I found, I think I talked about this in my book, I don't remember now, but clearing I use iCal, and I have for years, and I used to be always so proud of, like, how everything I color code it. ESP was red
Yep.
and acting was green and my son was orange and personal was pink, and so I could be like, "Look at how full my life is?"
Mm,
But then when I got out and I deleted all of my weekly conference calls, and I think it was about 20 hours just of conference calls. The green call, the orange call, the executive call, the goals lab call, all these different things that I had to be on. And truthfully, in at least the last 3, 4 years of before I left, I would be on the call and then I'd mute and like clean my house or go for a walk or like do push-ups or whatever. Like I was always multitasking, but I had to be on the call. I had to check in. Hey, Sarah here. Yes, I did this. I did that. Like check in on my things I was supposed to check in on. weigh in where I needed to weigh in, but most of the time I was phoning it in. But just to be able to delete those things
Oh, I
and all of a sudden have an open calendar, I'm like, what am I doing with my time? Who am I?
wow.
What do I even like?
Yeah.
You know, learning how to
Mm,
relax. I'm answering your question about healing from earlier.
yes,
I had to learn how to
yes.
relax. I'm still learning how to relax.
Uh,
That's hard.
it's a hard one.
Mm.
I feel the same. Uh, but that's good. So you're happy now, you're healing, you're obviously changing the world and helping people in a way, like you said, that wasn't really what you had planned,
Mhm.
but you're doing it now. So that's exciting.
Yes. Yeah.
Very cool. And
It's
you
very
got two
cool.
kiddos.
Got 2 beautiful kiddos. I mean, my life is basically trying to find the balance between, being a good present mom and and researching and prepping and then doing all the post stuff for the podcast and sort of acting. I took a bit of a time off over the last 5 or 6 months, recognizing I do love to act, but I don't love auditioning. In fact, I hate
Mm,
auditioning, and the
okay.
return on investment is just not high enough. So I stopped for a bit and then I'm really trying to, like, just act without auditioning, just
Yeah.
accept offers. So I'm putting it out there to the universe. I will be
Nice.
in your project if it's a good fit, but I don't wanna audition for it. I just don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Tell me.
that's it's a nice place to be.
Yeah. Oh, I bet. That's wonderful.
Mhm.
So wonderful. Well, I have three rapid fire questions that I end every podcast with.
Sure.
And the first one is, what is a book, besides yours, of course, because we know that one, that you would recommend to, maybe in this case, someone that cult related,
Okay,
and
hold on
you're
one second.
healing, what's helped?
Pull it up one second.
Mm-hmm.
It's right behind me here. This one. I do love this book, Take Back Your Life by Yanya Lala. It's just is probably the thing I recommend the most for healing. And
Okay.
sidebar, I did narrate the Audible for her
I
because I,
know.
because you probably know this, 'cause I couldn't read a book.
Ah,
Couldn't sit still. I had such bad PTSD when I first got out that I couldn't sit still. So I bugged her for years. I'm like, please, if you're going to do an Audible, let me do it. And I think I did a pretty good job.
oh, yeah.
I'd like to
It's
say.
amazing.
And I
Yeah.
also reading it again that slowly, and also because you have to, like, repeat almost every paragraph, it really I was like, that was a therapeutic I should have paid her to let me do
Yeah.
that.
I
Um,
bet.
that was really good. I also
That
really
is.
love Combating Cult Mind Control by Stephen Hassan. That's not so much well, it's part of the healing in terms of educating yourself, but I also recommend
Mhm.
that to people who, like, wanna understand it if they have a family member in and they wanna, you know how these things work.
Perfect. I like that viewpoint as
Mm,
well. I know you guys touch on that a lot in your podcast, because I think there are probably so many families out there. It's
mhm,
like, my kid's getting into this weird group. What do I do? How do I,
mhm.
support them? So I love how you guys kind of talk about that on your podcast. Well, we kind of already know the answer to this one, but it's, where did you meet your spouse, Nippy? So we kind of already know
In
that
a cult.
because, yes, it was part of your story. So we didn't have to go there.
Sure.
What is the best compliment you've ever received?
I just got so emotional because I get them over email and DMs on my Instagram when people say that my story or the podcast or the book or just speaking out has helped them,
Mm,
to process or to, in some cases, to even not join something in the first place or to escape. Um, to have that impact, to know they've had that impact is very meaningful to me.
mm,
That's the best
yeah.
compliment that I can
Yeah,
get.
that is.
Yeah.
And that's it. I don't know. The world we live in, where we can do that, by having a podcast or a social media account, it's it's amazing, because your reach is, there's no, oh, what's the word I'm looking for? There's no cap on the
Yeah.
reach
There's no
that you can
ceiling.
have.
Mhm.
What's that?
There's no ceiling. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And the fact that, like,
Mm,
we would never have met. You and I would
right.
never have met, you know?
I
I
know.
I have met actually mostly women, but also men, but, like, I've met so many incredible women. I have a friend in Israel. I've, friends all over the world. Many of them I haven't met in real life yet
Right.
because of the pandemic, but like, what a gift.
I agree. I completely agree. I've met some amazing people.
We'll
You
definitely meet in
being one
person
of
one
them.
day. It has to happen, and I think that's so great with your podcast that you are now using your platform to shine light on all these things that I know you've struggled with, and I
Mhm.
think this is a new era of people, you know, bearing their souls and their vulnerabilities so other people can go, "Oh, shit, I'm not alone."
Yep.
And they don't have to join a cult to cover that up.
Right, right. And I
Because
know, like, for me, that's my goal with the podcast is I don't want people to feel alone. And yeah, and I mean, yeah, again, with your podcast, Stephen, it's just I love it because
Oh,
and it's
thank
just
you.
so accessible, it's there for anyone. And I know even with the healing that I've done, therapy can be very expensive, and there are people that don't have access to some of those type of resources where podcasts pretty much anyone can get a hold of. And
Mhm.
I've even talked with my therapist about that because there's amazing podcasts I have in different areas of my life that have truly been so healing for me. And she's like, yeah, it's like free therapy,
Mhm.
and that's why I love bringing stories to other people's stories to everyone. Everyone has something to share.
Yeah.
And every person that I've interviewed or podcast I've been on, I've learned more than I thought I would.
Mhm.
And I just think that's really exciting to be able to do that. And I know
100%.
I've heard you talk about it too, but just even doing these interviews has been therapeutic. And that's what really got me into like, I'm going to do my own podcast because it's bringing, this dark subject into light, and truth, thrives in the light. And so it's just been healing just talking about this.
Good. I don't know
Yeah.
if you remember, there was a man named Barry Meyer. He wrote the original New York Times article, but he was interviewed for The Vow, and he said sunlight is the best disinfectant.
Oh, it's so true.
It's so true. Yeah.
So
And
true.
I've had people say that the podcast is therapy for them, and I am grateful for that and try to provide a list of resources for therapy.
Yes.
Especially in the cult space, so much of my initial therapy was talking to experts just to understand what had happened to me, and I
Right.
know that that's provided in their podcast with just looking at the templates, what are the strategies used, what are the abuses of power, and not to say, "Oh, that's a cult," or "You're in a cult," but, like, what's happening in your particular group or religion or relationship or organization where there's one of those strategies being used, and do
Right.
you wanna stay there,
Right.
you know?
And just be aware of it.
Yeah, be aware and act accordingly.
Yeah. And you do have an amazing list of resources, which I will put in the show notes
Great.
because I think you're just doing so many good things in the
Thank you.
whole cultiverse.
Mhm.
And
Will you
I,
share the, "I got out" as well?
oh, yeah.
Hashtag "I got out"?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah,
I'll share
please
that
do.
for sure.
Okay.
That's it. Yeah. For any listeners, go follow I Got Out, the hashtag. So yeah, I just think it's very exciting what you're doing.
Thank you.
And thank you for sharing like all these bits of your story through your podcast as you're interviewing other people. Because we get to know you a little bit better
Mhm.
as you're interviewing your guest. I
Mhm.
love it.
Amazing. I
Love it.
love it
Well,
too, and thanks for having me on yours.
yes, you're welcome. Thank you so much for being
Anytime.
on it.
Anytime.
Thank you.